everybody, welcome back to Reader's Workshop. Before we get started, let's make sure we're ready to learn. So eyes watching, ears listening, quiet as a mouse, and still like a pretzel. Okay, so the last time we met, we learned that fables are a special type of folktale. And we learned a few things about fables. We learned that they typically have animal characters, an outdoor setting, which makes sense because animals live outside, and an important moral to learn, which was that big lesson that the author wants us to remember most. Here's a good example, The Lion and the Mouse. We also saw this slide, which showed all the different types of folk tales. Here's where we learned about fables. Today we're going to talk about this one. We're going to learn the characteristics of fairy tales. So here are some super famous fairy tales that you probably have heard of. You may have read the books or watched the movies, but we have Hansel and Gretel, Sleeping Beauty, Rumpelstiltskin, The Frog Prince, Rapunzel, The Princess and the Pea, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and of course the ultimate classic, Cinderella. These are definitely some I remember from growing up myself. So fairy tales are a special kind of folktale which usually have some type of magic and often begin with those timeless words, once upon a time. The characters in fairy tales can either be very good. Look at here, I've got an angel, I've got a halo over here. They can be very good. The phone was ringing, so I pressed pause. They can be very good, like Cinderella was, or they can be evil. Fairy tales often have talking animals. Here's just a couple of examples. And they have royalty. And what royalty means is like kings, queens, princes, and princesses, like people who rule the kingdom. That's who royalty is. Lots of times in fairy tales, there's a magical character that has special powers. Like for instance, here's this one. She's saying, "I'm your fairy godmother." So there's always not always, but there's sometimes someone who has special powers that's going to help you beat the bad guys. The setting of fairy tales usually takes place in some sort of kingdom, so it would make sense that it would be in a castle. Or they can be in the woods. And even this woods looks a little bit magical in a way, right? The other very special thing about fairy tales is what's called the rule of 3 or 7. So items happen in sets of 3 or 7. So there can be like 3 or 7 characters. Like here you have Snow White and the 7 dwarves. Okay? Or you might have the 3 little pigs. Or Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Okay, so sets of 3. 3 or 7 events. So like for instance, when Jack goes up the beanstalk, he has to go up 3 times. He has 3 things that he has to get. Oops. Or there's 3 or 7 tests that the character must overcome. So like, in order to beat the bad guys, he's got to do 3 very particular things. Or 7. And of course, with fairy tales, they often end with these famous words, "and they lived happily ever after." So that wraps up what you need to know about fairy tales. You can read a fairy tale just like we do, and we hope you enjoy this week's fairy tales. We'll see you next time. Bye.